Now, another feature that every Photoshop designer needs to be familiar with and take advantage of is smart objects. Now, smart objects are basically a way of working non-destructively in the sense that you can bring objects in or images and be able to scale them up and down non-destructively. Now, as you know, when you're inside Photoshop and you scale a photograph down, you're downsampling. You're resampling the image and basically throwing out information. When you size up or scale up, you're resampling up, therefore you're inventing information that degrades the quality of your images. Now, if you're in a program like InDesign or Illustrator and you import these graphics, you can scale them up and down all day and it doesn't affect them because they're imported. They are basically referring to the original file, that the original high-res file. Inside Photoshop, it embeds everything, so so quality has a tendency to get lost, especially when you're experimenting or conceiving a design. So I always like to use my vector graphic example when I'm talking about smart objects. So I've got here these graphics here in Illustrator. I'm just going to go ahead and take this spade here and go ahead and select it and copy to the clipboard. Now I'm going to jump over to Photoshop, and I've already got a document created here, and I'm just going to go under the Edit menu and go to Paste. Now, coming from Illustrator, it's going to ask me how do I want to paste this into Photoshop as a smart object, pixels, path, or a shape layer. In this case, I'm going to bring it in as a smart object. And I'll click OK. So it's going to go ahead and bring it in, and it's going to allow me to go ahead and scale it, position it initially how I want it, and we'll just go ahead and bring it in and just put it right there. Now, I'm going to paste it in here again as regular pixels, just so you can see an example here. So click OK, and it brings it in. I'm going to scale it up just like I did before, and there we have both graphics. So now one is imported as a smart object, one is imported as pixels. So what I was talking about a moment ago, let's take the one that is not a smart object, standard pixels here, and let's take it and say I want to scale it down. I'm going to scale it down almost like it was a small icon size. I'm thinking, all right, like something like that. And I'll position it down here, and it could be part of my design or something like that. And then I think later, no, I want to scale it up again. So I'm going to go over here and scale it back up. And lo and behold, look what has happened. We have completely degraded the quality of this graphic. What happened? Well, when we brought it in, and now it's pixels, it's now embedded into this particular file, which is 8 by 8 at 150 pixels per inch. So it's not a huge file. It's not a very high-res file. But at this dimension or at this size, this graphic looks fine. What happens is when we scale it down, I'm just holding down the Shift key to hold the proportion. I'm scaling it down. It doesn't need as much information to display it at the smaller size. Therefore, it throws away that information. It doesn't need all that extra information, so it throws it away, and now it's displaying it at this smaller size. When we decided to scale it back up, however, and I'm going to bring it back up here, what is going on is when we scaled it down, it threw away that extra information. When we scale it back up, it doesn't remember that extra information. Therefore, it has to invent pixels. It has to extrapolate based on what little information is there, and then try and best recreate the graphic as best it can. As you can see, it's not very good. Loses the quality. If you are a designer and you're working on a composite design inside Photoshop and you're working with objects and scaling them and resizing them and resampling and repositioning them to get the right look, this is going to degrade the quality of your images. So let's look at the smart object version of this graphic. Same graphic. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to scale it down to that smaller size and position it down here. And it looks like it did before. However, I'm going to go ahead and rescale it back up and press enter, and look at that. It's remaining sharp, and that's because it's embedded inside of this smart objects, which means it is referring to the original vector information. It's not referring to the pixel information that was created when it was imported. Now, if you go in here into this file, and you see this small icon in the layers panel, which indicates this is a smart object. If you double click on that, because this is a vector smart object, it's going to open it back up inside Illustrator. And notice I can go in here and modify any properties about this graphic I want because it's referring to the original vector information. This is why it's able to keep all those clean lines. If you are a designer building composites inside Photoshop, anytime you're using a logo or a graphic element in your designs, no matter which resolution your document is, definitely put it inside of a vector or inside of a smart object like this so you can scale it up and down without worry of whether or not you're going to lose quality in the image. This is the basic function of smart objects, and this is why they were placed inside Photoshop. Now, another function of it with regard to images, now I have here this background graphic, and you can see it's, again, not a very large document because I'm just building a small design. But I'm going to go back to these images, these high-res shots we used for the poster that we did. And I'm going to go ahead and extract this one of me. I look so thrilled in this image, by the way. It was actually for again, like I said, for a poster that we did for Photoshop World. And I'm just going to go ahead and use Refine Edge, and let's go ahead and just tidy up the selection a little bit. And I'm just using the Refine Radius brush just around the edge here just to kind of clean it up a little bit, make it a little bit cleaner selection there. So we'll go ahead and do that. As a selection, this isn't really critical to what we're talking about, but it's just a little point there. So it's an active selection. I'm going to go ahead and press Command or Control J, puts that image on its own layer. So it's nicely extracted. Now, if I were to bring this over to this background document, you can see it is very large. That's because this original file is full res. You can see it's 11 by 17 at 240 pixels per inch. That's a very large document with a lot of information. And I don't want to lose that information. I want to have the ability to scale this up and down and yet maintain its original integrity. However, you can see it is a regular layer. So if I go over here and scale this image down to fit inside this image, that will be fine for what I'm working for. And if that's what the way I want it to, the size I want it to be, that will be perfect. But if, let's say, as I'm designing, I'm thinking, oh, well, I want it to be a little bit smaller and to the side, and perhaps we'll bring in another graphic. Here I've got Mr. Klaskowski also carrying the same theme. Very large res file. We'll go ahead and bring that down and scale it to fit inside here. Maybe perhaps position it like that. So it looks like we're kind of standing next to each other. And let's just say through the course of my designing, I'm scaling these objects. Even if I scale it slightly, I'm still resampling. I am still dispensing information I don't want to get rid of, because that's going to degrade the quality of my image. If I just, constantly go over here and adjust size and scale it down a little bit bigger, and I was like, oh no, I'm too small now, I want to scale myself back up, I'm losing quality every single time I am resampling that image up and down. So to avoid that, before I bring these images into the document, go ahead and just right click or go to the flyout menu here in the layers panel and convert to Smart Object. This will permanently hold that high quality information because it's constantly referring to the original file. It's no longer embedded into that document. And again, doing it to the same thing here, convert to Smart Object, and I'll go ahead and drag it over. Now I have the freedom of scaling and repositioning, rotating, doing whatever I want to each of these layers without the worry of losing the original quality of the image. This is, again, the beauty of Smart Objects. It gives me this ability to have this control and being able to build these elements. Like I said, if you're in a program like InDesign, which is building imported elements in a non-resolution dependent file, so you can scale them up and down because it's constantly referring to the original source file. In the case of Photoshop, again, you're bringing files into Photoshop. If you embed them, then they will utilize whatever resolution the current file is set to. By making a smart object, it is referring to its original document settings, which in this case of these two photos is that high-res file that I originally extracted them from. It's maintaining that information no matter what size document I put it in and no matter what I scale it and how many times I scale it in the program. So again, whether it's vector graphics or actual images, a huge advantage is to implement smart objects to be able to have that freedom of sorting out your designs, refining them, making them where you want them to be, and then you won't have to go back and redesign them. Because in the old days, this is what people would do. They would take low-res files or low-res versions of their files, build a concept, and then go back and build the high-res. This eliminates that step altogether. You can build your concept with your high-res files, and once it's done, you don't have to go and re-import the high-res files and refine it. They're done, they're there, and it's maintained that information. Huge advantage of using smart objects.